powerful, more beautiful, amazing Hayley Quinn, your love expert.
It's sad for me. I actually want to come out here cradling that pony. That's my current frame of mind at the moment. So my talk today really is about, dare I say it, self-love, and not the sexy self-love that was alluded to in that presentation earlier, lowering the tone, but the real stuff, actually. Because the title of the talk that I was originally going to do was called How to Make an Audience Fall in Love with You. And like, I've actually been organised for once in my lifetime, and I've written up notes for you guys. And the problem is, I think when it's like how to make an audience fall in love with you, it's like trying to make somebody else fall in love with you. If you don't love you, this can't happen very, very effectively. And I know that it's an idealistic place, right, where we love ourselves every day and we feel really happy and really complete and that we've got everything sorted out and we operate from that space. And when we have to go and walk onto a big stage, that we're 100% ready and feeling happy to share the love for that performance. But I think the truth is, for most of us, we're rarely in that emotional space. I mean, I think that nearly every day I go through periods of time where I don't really, I don't like myself, I'm not happy with myself, I feel sad about something, I feel pain. And I think sometimes actually what I've discovered is instead of trying to create a story around that and put on a false persona, it's usually better just to meet people on their level and treat your audience like you're speaking to someone one-on-one and actually really, really level with them. So as Anik said, I was supposed to be here last year, and I remember the day so well. It's kind of one of those things that's going to be in my mind. I'd come here and I wasn't feeling well at all, and I got down into the downstairs bathroom, and at that point, somewhere in the basement of this building, I was on my knees and in loads of pain, and I thought that was it. When the moment I had to have a recognition that I wasn't the same person that I was in the past, and it was actually I thank a lot to these two people here, and it could help pick me up the floor and guaranteed that it was no problem at all, the fact that I was helpfully collapsing 5 minutes before I was supposed to be the speaker. And Elliot, who loaned me 20 quid that I still haven't paid back, to put me in a taxi to hospital. And the truth behind that story was, I don't know if you guys saw, I actually did a TEDx event in Nevada about a month ago now. And the truth behind that story was I just had a miscarriage, and at that point in time I was having some kind of like horrible secondary infection and that was it. And it was a miscarriage amongst other, which is there while I'm there on the back of the stage cradling a pony. It starts to get a bit suspicious. And actually that miscarriage was part of a whole other range of terrible life events, including my partner attacking me, taking my things, leaving me. So I really lost everything that I had in one foul swoop. You might see me striding in here with like a leather mini skirt on and think, it's all good, it's fine for her. And in fact, the reality is, like the reality for me, like the reality for any of you, is that we all experience an extreme range of emotions. Human life doesn't allow us to get through it without a few scrapes. And you know what, actually, I think it's about claiming ownership of that and accepting the authenticity of that moment. So I was preparing to do this TED Talk, and I spent a lot of time thinking about what way to take it, because for me, if I'm doing a presentation, the easy space for me to go to is to be humorous, to like crack a joke and be funny, because that's a great way to deflect things from yourself. However, about 2 days beforehand, I had an epiphany, which you can see if you watch the talk on stage. The first 30 seconds is a bit ropey, where I was like, you know what? I'm going to go out there and I'm going to tell the truth. And that was the one thing that was in my mind. So I was on the plane to Reno. This is the number one thing of things not to do before a TED Talk, re-scripting the TED Talk. I thought, you know what, I'll just change the first 30 seconds. I'll go from doing like a funny story, and instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to say something that's impactful, that's truthful. And then I realized that when you change the first 30 seconds, you have to sort of change the other 13 minutes and 30 seconds, because otherwise the whole thing doesn't make sense. So I got to Reno, massively jet lagged, went to the event the next day, I had to get into the lecture theatre, which was 1,400 people strong at 6 o'clock in the morning. I wasn't on till 4 p.m. So my great plan was to learn the whole talk in the dressing room downstairs. So there I was again in the basement where I can normally be found, learning my talk over and over again and pray. It was in between revision and prayer. Those are the two things that I just did for 8 hours solid until that message went into my mind. And then you know what I did? I walked out onto that stage and I wore this like lovely princessy dress because I was going to try and talk about romance and how it's not all how it's usually cracked up to be. Step out on stage and then I say something completely different anyway. And, and the words just come flying out of my mouth, you know? And then I get to my first joke and it was all right, but you'll see it in the talk. And the pain that was there, it was almost like I'd been carrying this message around with me for about 4 or 5 months, the one that I couldn't give to you guys last time. And then when it was like I got onto the stage, and when I finally was there, I was like, right, I'm going to unleash. And it all came out. And something about it actually worked. There was a resonance that was there. I mean, I'm saying it worked. Lots of people probably think it was terrible, but I liked it. I think it was painful, it was truthful. And I think sometimes that's the only way that you can roll when you do public speaking or any kind of real life event. And so what I wanted to share with you is really the skill of taking that ownership. When I first went on stage, and I think my lines were something along the lines of, I said, so let me tell you a love story, guys. Once upon a time, not so long ago, in a land 5,172 miles away, I met a guy. And he was cool and blah, blah, blah. I really sent it up. I was like, right, I'm going to come out here and act like a complete bimbo, and I'm going to have my dress, and I'm going to make them have this preconception of me. And then when I said, oh, yeah, and then, when I was really ill in bed and actually at the point where I was literally on the physical floor, crawling around like an animal, that was the last I saw of him. At that point, people laughed. Because they did, and I was like, you hear me go in the talk, I'm not kidding. Like, I'm not kidding. And that's because that range of emotions and that story arc, it can catch people unawares, but it's actually what pulls people in. It's like if you're having a conversation with someone, like if you have a really normal, average conversation where you say, talk about the weather or, what you're up to later that day. No one remembers anything of that. You remember things which take you through a range of emotions and take you through a different space. You remember things that are painful to you, but also that you can laugh about later on. And I think one of the real skills that I've learned and one of the secrets to being an amazing public speaker is when you can take that emotional message and you can accept what space you're in and you can begin to deliver it, and actually you move people through a range of emotions that you're with. So maybe if you go in and you're starting to do a presentation that day and you've turned up and as always happens, you're not in the right headspace to do it. Something has happened. I think there's a real beauty in taking ownership of that. And I think that's what I just did then when, depressingly, when someone chucked a pony at me, the first thing I did was get it into the rocking position in my arms. Like, my subconscious brain was obviously working at a terrible level there. But there's no point me denying it. Like, I've just become aware of it because I've just done it just before I go on stage. So if I try and withhold that from you guys, suddenly there'll be some little voice or something that's bothering me at the back of my head that's going to prevent my message from getting through. And I think in all areas of our life, whether it's the public speaking or whether we're just engaging with someone one-on-one, taking that ownership and that responsibility of what we want is so important. And you know what, it kind of makes me angry some of the times, actually, how we're told that we're not allowed to have what we want. As a love expert, dare I say, this is something that I come across an awful lot, where actually most of the issues that we find in personal relationships or with when we're trying to do something like a talk is that we feel like we're not allowed to have most of the stuff that we want. We just don't have permission to do it. It's like we're all operating under some strange code of conduct or some rule book that someone made up sometime that no one understands. Like, I get asked some or I consider to be really strange questions in my line of work, such as like, what's the rule on who should split the bill? I'm like, I don't know. And it's almost like we think that there's some like, oh, shut up. But it's like we operate under this belief that like someone inscribed a stone tablet somewhere with the rules of how we should do or do not our life, and that we all have to suddenly abide to that. And also that actually that a lot of the time, if you enter into an interaction, especially one that makes you feel vulnerable, whether that's public speaking or actually maybe in a very intimate relationship, it's very easy to get, I think, spooked at the beginning and actually not understand and not accept what you want, and actually that the other person's belief becomes stronger than yours, and suddenly you're getting pushed around and you don't even realize it. It's like if you're having a text message exchange with someone and you're thinking, oh, I'm so needy, or when are they going to call, or I feel bad about that. And you're like, oh, I'm such a dork, why am I this way? And you're like stabbing yourself in the heart, kicking yourself, being such a loser, and you're like, why can't I just man up? And the truth is, it's like, in that situation, here's the right thing to do. The right thing to do is go, actually, this is my reality. This is how I feel about something. And actually, guess what? It's my life. And so my perspective on this counts. In fact, I think I might be right. This is one of my new favorite phrases, which is to create that trust in yourself, to think, yeah, actually, I think I am correct on this one. Because in lots of all these little interpersonal dynamics, whether it's arguing whether you should message someone, who should message who after a first date, or whose job it is to pay, or, oh my God, they're seeing someone else, but you didn't have that conversation yet. Should you be angry? Should you not? This is not like a philosophical discussion where there's a right answer here. The right answer is your personal boundary. It's your personal belief, So, and that's what you have to identify. It's not to intellectualize the whole thing and spend ages, as I have done in the past, writing lists, ringing every freaking friend in the phone book, asking if my belief is right or not. Just go, actually, my needs aren't being met here. A boundary is being trampled on. I'm not happy. And if you can do that, and if you can say that, and you can take ownership of it, suddenly that becomes extremely powerful. And it's the same thing here. You know what? You stand on a public stage, guess what? People are going to challenge you. They're going to throw things at you. And that is actually all right. It's not that you're trying to prove that here's the thing that I believe, is like, do whatever you want as long as you're honest about it and you're not hurting anybody, right? So it's like, who's to say what's correct or what's incorrect or what's right or what's wrong? And believe me, as a YouTuber, I am queen of getting horrendous comments routinely, as if my life wasn't bad enough. Like, I then have to log on to YouTube and have people speculating about my pubic hair on a day-to-day basis. Like, that's my life. So if you're in that space, you've just got to understand that when you put yourself up there, there's an inevitability that actually we have a funny culture a lot of the time where we actually like to pull people down from pedestals. And you know what? I don't believe in that. I think actually if someone's on a pedestal, I think that first of all, they have an obligation to say, it's not that great up here, by the way, just so you know, same stuff, different day. Firstly, that's that person's obligation. But also that we shouldn't pull them down. We need to support people more that stand on that stage and actually try and stand up for something within themselves. So there's a few techniques that I find really helpful that I talk about a lot. The first one is that ownership thing, that acknowledgement. Often, and this is a technique that was, funnily enough, taught to me by Ross Jeffries. Do any of you guys know him? Very famous hypnotist and NLP practitioner. He wears lots of rings that he calls his power rings. He's in his mid-late 50s and likes to make crack jokes about seducing 20-year-old Swedish girls. It's like that kind of guy. But a very, very, like at the same time, a very genius public speaker, like a dastardly evil overlord of public speaking, should you ever get the pleasure to meet him. And what you'll find is he actually said something to me that I think was quite on point for this ownership thing, this ownership of moving people through whatever emotional space you're in. And he's like, you know what, whenever any audience arrives in front of you in the room, you know what, we all arrive with our own individual prejudices, biases, and judgments against who the people we see in front of them. I bet there's some of you in here like, oh my God, who's this chick who's just rocked up? She looks way too young, dodgy, poorly dressed to have anything worthwhile saying. And you know what, that's all right, because we all hold judgments against the people we meet. It's like it's human instinct. Now, the smart person, whether it's in a thing like this or a debate or something at work or a personal argument, you get out ahead and you hold your hands up to whatever the problem is right early on. And if you do that and you take ownership of what emotional space in and you acknowledge your limitations towards people, what it does is actually, if there's a block in their mind, it helps to shift it along. How this was expressed at the time is I was given this advice sitting in Ross Jeffrey's lair in California on my way in 2014 to the annual Pickup Artist Convention in Las Vegas, where apart from 2 strippers, I was the only woman in the room. So as you can imagine, there's like a room of 100 men there in something called Project Vegas, which was a lair from which these men descended onto Vegas to learn how to seduce women. So it was a really friendly atmosphere. And what I found as well is I was like, because I was the woman, obviously, like there's like, it's like I walk on stage with a uterus. This is like problem 1, right? So I'm already going to be judged on the fact that here I am. And I was like, you know, a couple of years younger then, and I'm trying to tell these bunch of guys how to pick up women. Like, who's going to listen to me? Like, that's a legitimate thing. So here's what Ross Jeffries advised me to do. He said, okay, he said, say this. I went, all right, so who in this room is, you know, a bit suspicious of me, you know, because I'm a woman. Like, what can I really know about you? Raise your hand if you're suspicious. And, you know, a couple of hands went up. And I said, you know what, if you're not suspicious now, you should be. Because let's face it, I'm a woman, what can I know about what's going on with you, really? Like, I haven't lived your life. You know, I haven't tried to walk away, and I haven't had to go through puberty being a guy, having wet dreams, you know. I haven't had to do that. So I was like, well, it's like, how can I know about your reality? And this is what I said, which is really brilliant, and this is a fantastic little technique that you can point to. I said, you know, most of what I say is probably going to be rubbish, so you can ignore it. You can ignore all that. But just in case, there's just one thing that maybe tweaks your interest. You know, if there's just one thing that makes you kind of pay a bit more attention, just write it down. You know, it'd make me feel good if you could write it down. So just, you know, if most of it probably won't apply to you, it'll probably be rubbish. But if there's something that kind of resonates with you, then do it. And that technique of saying, hang on, here's the objection, I am the objection, and then moving from that and saying, you know what, if there's just one thing that I say that's one point that might be vaguely relevant, if your ears start to prick up, then write that down, make note of it. It was a very disarming way, because what we have to do is we have to understand that a lot of the time, when you stand on that stage, that bias is there against you, and if you don't do something to mitigate that bias or remove it from you, then that will prevent your message from being sent through clearly. Now, there's other ways that we can send messages through in a slightly under the radar way as well. A little brief example of this would be, now, if someone goes and tells you something directly, like, I'm a really confident, like, say you're in a business meeting and someone says, I've got it, I know the perfect idea, I'm so sure this is going to work. My immediate instinctual reaction to that is to go, oh my God, they're a complete idiot. They don't know what they're talking about. This is going to be a total disaster. It's like when we're offered information too directly, our conscious mind resists. It goes, and it starts to criticize it or pull it apart. So if someone tells you, whether like this or in a meeting, I'm a confident person or I'm a very honest person, you immediately think, thanks to our fabulous British culture, that they're probably lying or fibbing or massively exaggerating the truth. And that's simply because the message has been sent too directly and it's hitting a wall of resistance. So instead, if you can do one of those things that Anik mentioned earlier and you can tell a little story, it sends the message along, and you know what happens? Then it goes into a person's mind and the person has to infer the values from it, right? And because their mind does its own kind of algorithms around it and comes to its own conclusion, they're a million times more likely to accept that message that's in there. Whether that's Little Red Riding Hood, you know, I go, what's the point there? Wolves are bad. That's not your grandmother if it's got a snout. I don't know. I can't remember that story very well. But there's an implied, fairy tales are a great one, right, for having implied messages about how we should lead our lives. And the story is brilliant as well, because you know what else a story does? A story has its own life force within it. A story can be told and retold and retold and retold and retold, and the same values are in it forever and ever. You might be interested to know, but there's over 1,000 Noah's Ark myths from all around the world. So that's a little example of how, regardless of language, a story of a particular time and a belief system has spread as a part of that. So stories aren't just for babies or for kids, they're actually extremely powerful ways of delivering emotion and a fantastic mechanism for delivering something about yourself. So another thing that you might want to think about is if you're about to go on that stage and you're like, I'm pretty sure these people are going to judge me. I don't look like the kind of person they're going to accept into their fold. I think they're going to challenge me, or they're not going to be receptive to what I'm saying. Sometimes stating things directly is not the best way forward. Sometimes it is. Another time, though, it might be better to wrap up an anecdote around what you're saying. So a little simple example would be, instead of saying, I'm a really honest person, you might say, oh, it's really funny, actually. Just before I came in here, I was 5 minutes late because, weirdly, there was a bag that had just been left in the middle of the lobby. And I opened it up, and it was full of money. So I'm like, is this a drug deal? I don't know. But anyway, I handed it into reception, and I hope they're just not going to steal it. I don't say anything directly about being honest, right? But it's obvious that I'm communicating that I'm honest and transparent and trustworthy person. So if you've got a point in your talk and you're not sure quite how receptive people are going to be to it, a great way to tackle it, again, is through a mechanism of story. So we've got the acknowledgement thing and taking ownership, just going, I know I'm a girl, or I know I look silly, or I know I regret my outfit choice this evening, or I know you all saw me with the pony. Like, whatever it is, just hold your hands up. It's like if you're in a dating situation, someone says, are you flirting with me? Best response ever, yes, I am. Yes, I completely am, baby. You take ownership of it. You take ownership of it, you win. Those are the rules. Second thing, stories are really fantastic mechanisms for delivering things, and they are subtle and under the radar. Another beautiful subtlety is humor. I just text my love interest in LA that I've suddenly developed because, you know what? I ain't done yet. Back in the game over here. I sent him a copy, because I am a romantic, of Chaucer. And Chaucer is really awesome, actually. He's a great storyteller. And one of the things he does really effectively is he uses humor as well. Humor can be one of the best ways of getting across something subtly, but in a way that, again, sticks in people's mind. It has a sticky factor to it. Back to wet dreams. Everyone's just got that joke. I was like, that's a good joke. Screw it, I'm going to make the joke. And of course, now what's going to happen is everyone will think, what was Hayley Quinn's talk like? And they'll be like, she just kept talking about wet dreams and orgasms, like in sticky sheets. Like, that's all that's going to be remembered of this, but never mind. So humour, right? Humour. Is it not? Humour is memorable. It will be something for, of course, I've got you to remember exactly the wrong message now. I guess I am a love expert, though, so it's roughly in the right ballpark of stuff I should be talking about, sort of. And this all leads me back, really, to this beautiful thing about the real kind of self-love and loving yourself. And really, if you want to hear more about that, I would say, and I'm going to plug it again at the end, do watch my TED Talk that I did. It's called Searching for Love to Escape Ourselves, which is, because it's all about my belief that sometimes we run away from who we are using sex, dating, and love as the biggest distraction that we have, because when we're lost in someone else or some emotional drama or the pursuit of sex or the pursuit of dates, guess what? We don't have to face up to any of our own problems because we're too focused outside of ourselves. But really, when it comes to the self-love, when it comes to the public speaking aspect of things, there's something in there. There's a few key principles that I think apply both when you're talking like this and when you're talking one-to-one with a person that are super, super important. And if you can kind of like get the principles, I think nothing else really matters. Whenever I teach people to help them out with, I say it's dating, it's never really dating. It's always about like identity or love or some sort of quest of some kind. But when I'm working on that, I think, wouldn't it be rubbish to teach somebody like a script of lines that they have to learn in order to seduce or woo someone else? Like what? Like first of all, even if it worked, that person's going to feel terrible about themselves because they've had to learn lines like an actor in order to pull. Like, that's not going to make you feel good internally. So instead, I work with a different way, which is I work with big levers. And I think if you understand some big principles and some big concepts and you have those strongly in place, the communication then becomes easy. So my principles that I believe in for that kind of stuff and for this kind of stuff, to begin with, awareness is number one. So having an awareness of your subject and the biases in it, particularly when we're working with something like language, as we are when we're doing speaking. Do you know what? There's biases in language. Nearly everything we see or hear, there's a little subtext in it all the time. An example of this would be, I was flicking through Grazia magazine for my sins earlier this morning, and it said something like, I don't know, which romantic couples, is Gwyneth Paltrow ready to marry again? Her love interest wants to propose, but she's still kind of into Chris Martin, so will she come? And I'm reading this like, this is basically terrible propaganda that's selling us, and the subtext is that, you know, if you're a beautiful woman, of course the man wants to marry you straight away, and then there's this love triangle contingent. If you look at any top line message, there'll be many, many others in it. So to begin with, if you really want to zero in on your message, have the awareness and understand that lots of the ways that we phrase things, language creates our world and it creates how we see things. So have an awareness of the phrases that you use and the words and their biases. Secondly, have knowledge of yourself. Have knowledge of what you want, because I'm going to say it again. You know what? Like, as long as you're being honest and you're not hurting anybody else, you can have whatever you want. It's like I'm like Aladdin's genie up here with like the wishes, but you can. It's brilliant. I don't mind. Like, I don't care if you want to get married and have 3 babies, or you want to have wild love affairs to the end of your days until you die like Hugh Hefner. I don't mind. Like, to thy own self be true. But the beauty is when you actually don't bow down to how anybody else thinks you should do a talk, or how else anybody else thinks that you should communicate, or what you're allowed to have in a romantic or social relationship, and you actually go, this is me, this is what I want. Thirdly, you then go about communicating it. And remember, this is what the beauty of Pony is. It teaches you a wide variety of ways to communicate your message and bring it into the world. What I've been trying to do as well in this talk, I don't know if you guys noticed, is I've been trying to move through different emotional spaces. So some like pain, some humor, a little bit of anger and annoyance. Move through the emotional spaces, make use of humor, make use of storytelling, make use of acknowledgement, because it's the wide variety of emotions that people experience in your company. That's what makes you memorable. That makes a great talk. That's what makes you stand out from the rest of the crowd. It's actually not going into a monotonous space, but having a 360 degrees of emotion. And if you can bring that into your talk or into any other aspect of your life, people will love you for it. Because in fact, if you take ownership of your vulnerability and you go, this is me, love it or leave it. In fact, you know what? Only the bad people leave it, and the people that you don't actually need in your life. And actually, you know what you're going to be left with, as I have learnt the absolute hardest way possible, is that at the end of all that, when you have everything stripped away from you in every possible sense, what you're left with in the most beautiful way is yourself. And actually, when you stop seeing that as something that's a bit rubbish and that's not as good as other people, and that actually so many other people are more awesome than you in so many other ways, and you go, actually, I am all right. You know, you don't have to even go for self-love. Maybe you go for, I'm all bloody right. I'm fine. And you actually recognize that person that you have with you 24/7 all the time, that's the person that has your back. That's the person that you need to respect. That's the person that you need to love and take care of. And when you're on a stage like this, that's the person you want to represent. You know, and not everybody is going to be on board with that person, but who cares? Because this is about being you, this is about self-expression, and this is about the true meaning of finding that love within yourself. I'll send you a personal thank you and everything if you could share it, or just watch it, and if you like it, share it. That's fair. You can find it, I'm on Twitter at Hayley Quinn. I'm also desperately in need of Twitter followers and engagement on that thing, because I'm not good at social media. So if you're on Twitter, if you go to @Hayley Quinn, it's pinned to the top of my profile, so you can retweet it. Or you can find it if you go to the TEDx YouTube channel and you put Hayley Quinn, Searching for Love to Escape Ourselves. And like, it's the one thing that if you could do that for me, it's like, please, that'd be amazing. And then I'll come back here every single time and I'll never collapse in the basement ever again. Thanks, guys.